let me share something important with you. If you just got married and you're like diving into the deep end of the water of marriage and you think, oh my God, sex, chores, money. I gotta get these things right. I'm gonna tell you how to get all those things right with one skill. We're gonna talk about boundary setting. I know. Boundary setting, it sounds just like my saying to you, wow, I'm gonna make an appointment with you for the dentist for a root canal. And it sounds so awful. Well, I guess it's like root canal in that when you get boundary setting right, your marriage is healthy. Just like sometimes you have to do cleanup to keep your teeth healthy. And today, I am going to tell you what I've learned from being married as of yesterday, 41, count them, 41 years to pop-ups. And these are the life lessons that come from one marriage, but also come from my having spent my career talking to thousands of women, just like you, I bet, at least in some ways. Are you ready? All right, I'm going to give you a lesson that will get you to 50 years. This is like tattooed on my brain now. So maybe you can try putting it in ink on your brain or on your arm. Not setting boundaries is a bigger threat to your marriage than setting them. Not setting them is the biggest threat of all. I'm going to let that sink in if you've written it down. It's like swatches on cosmetics, right? Let it just sit there and see if it sinks in and takes hold. Why is boundary setting so hard? I mean, a lot of us who are people pleasers like me, are you a people pleaser? Really have a tough time with boundary setting. And they're a zillion experts of different kinds talking to us about set your boundaries. Why is it so hard? Here is my confession about why it is so hard for me. Because I'm afraid. I'm afraid. And particularly in my marriage, I was afraid of setting boundaries because I thought, oh, as soon as I set a boundary, he's not going to like it. I'm going to set a boundary and he's going to pull away from me. And I hate that. Can you feel that energetically when someone pulls away from you? Ugh. And I was deep down afraid. I loved him so much. I loved the kids. I loved our life. I wanted to make it work. And because of my childhood stuff, lots of us have that, I thought, if I really set a boundary, he's going to hate it so much he's going to leave me. That was just clear to me in my crazy pants mind, that boundaries meant he was gonna walk out the door. Did you ever feel that way? I think a lot of us do. So what I have learned, the big lesson for Granny Ronna, and maybe for you, is cannot have a healthy marriage without boundaries. Just can't. Because if you don't have boundaries, you don't have two people. And if you don't have two people, what have you got? You've got just like one big bowl of intertwined mush. And if there aren't two people and you don't exist within your own frames, you lose the hot. You gotta have some kind of differences in polarity to still be attracted to each other and still be excited by each other, and for you both to bring things to the marriage. You know what I'm thinking? I'm gonna see if I can sell you on boundary setting. Boundary setting is sexy. It is sexy. Setting boundaries is like, oh, can I say this as a granny? I'm gonna say it so that it can be cut. Setting boundaries is sort of like sex toys before you have sex. Sometimes you gotta warm yourself up, and emotionally warming yourself up means that you know where your boundaries are.
It's the motherfucking Eagle Double G.
So it's really all the same skills. You gotta work on yourself in order to be ready to engage, whether it's about chores or kuchimama. I was thinking about my mental image of boundaries when I was getting ready to talk to y'all. And I realized that when I was younger, my mental image of boundaries was sort of like those movies about strictly enforced border crossings when you go from one country to another. You know, going back to Europe before countries got easier about boundary crossing. So my idea was a boundary crossing had a guardhouse on one side and a guardhouse on the other side, and both sides had weapons. And to me, that was a boundary, that there was a hard boundary and that everybody was ready to defend their guardhouse. We certainly were. We specialized in verbal attacks. We're both smart. Jimmy's smarter. I'm more verbal, but Jimmy is more logical. So that when we engaged in a fight over boundaries, whoa, baby. It could get really exciting with those verbal bullets fighting. And eventually, he could be so logical that I just pull back and stop in my tracks, and we didn't work them out. But we've both been working on it so diligently for so long for ourselves, and as a couple, we kind of have learned some things that Pop-Pops wanted me to share with you also. I drew this image and I tried it out on Pop-Pops, and I want to try it out on you. I now know that my old image of boundary crossings was wrong. And this is my new image of my boundaries in my marriage to Pop-Pops. So you see that they're dotted lines where everybody can get through. They're little, everybody has little extensions of the boundary where they want a little more room. Sometimes on a daily basis, there's wiggle room depending on things that change. This is a very bad drawing, but it's supposed to be a stop sign. This is the place where it's like, do not, I'm telling you now, do not unless you want to rumble. And then there are some solid lines that we respect. If you are a visual thinker like me, you might want to at some point, if you in your journal or if you just have paper around that you can save, do a little sketch of what you think your boundaries look like with your beloved. See what you draw. Do you draw a hard line? Do you draw a thick line? Are you drawing double lines with the space between? Just get a visual image of what your boundaries look like. And then maybe later, after we get done, you can do a little drawing of what do your boundaries look like in the ideal world? What would you like your boundaries to look like? I'm pretty happy with this picture of our boundaries as of today, but there are things that I would change. So do a little sketch for yourself if that sounds like fun. Would you like to hear a story of when I just got married? I'll see if I can tell it quickly. I know granny stories can go a little long. When we got married, both the kids lived with us at least half time, one full time. We lived in a 900 square foot apartment, which meant the kids shared a bedroom, and we had 2 cats running around and always music blaring. The kitchen honestly was as big as this table, and I was working like a crazy person in a big corporation, and for my own reasons, I wanted to climb the ladder and I had a tough commute. So nights and weekends, chores. And so we were fighting a lot over boundaries, I think mainly because we were so tired and neither of us wanted to do everything that had to be done. And on my part, there was a lot of bossing about, you got to do this, you got to do that. And I was bossing myself internally. I got to do this, I got to do that. And what happens in a situation like that, when you don't have agreements and boundaries, is that resentment builds up. So when the resentment is up to here because you're not dealing with your boundaries, it is a short road to your mouth. Pop-Pops would tell you that's true. So does the story of Having verbal or unspoken disagreements about boundaries sound familiar to you? Are you feeling resentment because you feel like you're doing everything and your spouse is doing nothing and you ask and blah, blah, blah? Does all this end up in your brain, and sometimes when you're talking to your friends, as this statement: they will never change. He'll never change. She'll never change. They'll never change. Well, here is the granny truth. You are so right. They will never change. They will never change. So if that's what you're banking on, you have a problem. You have a problem because they are not going to change. Woof. What do you do about that? There are three skills that you need in order to have the ability to work on setting boundaries all the time in all the little ways that add up to a happy life. Better self-dialog. You know that voice in your head that, if you meditate, you know that voice really well. It's like you're sitting there and you're thinking that you're trying to concentrate on clearing your mind, and there's like a ribbon of information going across, and that is your self-dialogue. And if the self-dialogue is all about they are bad, that means working on what is your dialogue with yourself. One thing that's worked for me that might be helpful for you, but that's something you can work on for yourself. And if you want, give me a comment and I will add tips and links to other people I respect to work on this. But the change I've made to my self-dialogue is very simple. It just came to me one day. I think, oh, I can do this. I can do this. I can do this. And when I change my self-dialogue to I can do this, it empowers me. Forget them. I can do this. Not I can do all the chores, but I can do what needs to be done to show up as the person I want to be in my marriage, which will make my marriage better, and which, by the way, will give them room to change. So self-dialogue, work on that. There may be a different mantra for you. The one that turned up for me is, I can do this. Cannot overestimate the value of communication. It's funny, I just was visiting with a friend who was in her 60s, and she married someone who was in his 70s, brand new marriage, and they are working on communication. There are things they have to sit down and talk about. Now, the only difference that I can see between my friends who are close to my age and my friends who are in their 20s and just got married is that when you're older, you know you have to work on it. Sometimes when you're younger, you don't know. So there are two people I follow from whom I've learned a lot about communication. One is Brene Brown, nobody better on the planet for, how you represent yourself in a communication. And the other is the Gottmans. They are social scientists. They are a couple. They've been working on marriages for, talking about researching marriages for 40 plus years. So anyone who refers to them or anything you could read by them, that's going to give you a really solid foundation in terms of, well, what are you talking about, Granny, when you talk about communication? Here's something about communication that's sort of a two-parter that I see all the time. I see in myself, I see in people of whatever gender they are. And that is, the basis of communication is not talking, it's not writing, it's not posting. It is active listening. Communication starts with how you listen. And I've noticed in some relationships and marriages that I hear about that are going south and that end up disintegrating, is that neither partner is listening to really listening toward a goal of making it work. I've been following Jimmy on Relationships on YouTube, and he does a good job of laying out what does it mean to listen. A lot of us, when we're listening, not consciously maybe, but we're listening to spot the weaknesses in their argument. We're already working on how to return that serve before we understand what we're hearing. And even if we don't admit it to ourselves, our goal in listening is to win. We want to prove that we are right. That kind of listening that's about hearing what you think you're hearing in order to win is an oil tanker driving into your marriage. It may be moving slow, but it's moving. So listening skills, so important. As an aside, the hard thing about YouTube videos is that it's hard to listen to you, which I want to do. So talk back, okay? I want to hear what you got to say about all this. I put my heart and soul into it to communicate with you, and I can't hear you. So please talk to me and share what's going on. Here's the thing I keep learning about setting boundaries. One of the tools that I use to set boundaries now is praise. Praise is a miracle. It's a miracle for me. I've talked about praise as a tool for setting boundaries. And I want to talk for a quick minute about inflicting pain as a way to set boundaries. We all do it. Don't tell me you don't. My specialty is the cold shoulder. I don't holler. Jimmy says that I get so frosty, it's like dry ice. Like you can't bear it when I get so cold. And what we think is that inflicting pain in our spouse gets them to change their behavior. Well, it does, but the first thing is, do you want that as a foundation of your marriage? And does it work over the long run? So I'm a dog person. I can't help it. We are just like crazy about our 5-year-old dog. And I think that humans and dogs have something in common in this regard. For a while, there were people who were really into training dogs with pain. Some of them went to prison for it, like shock collars and, hurting them in order to get them to be obedient. So the dogs did respond, but they were afraid, right? They learned how to be afraid. And those dogs end up being vicious, and they often end up biting somebody else. It's like a bad story. So when you think of yourself or notice yourself inflicting pain, even a little bit, even like, oh, jab, on your spouse, see if you can put just a quick little thought in there of, is this what I want? Is this really what I want? I bet you don't. And maybe you can take a breath and stop. Here are some quick tips from my marriage. If any of them resonate with you and you would like to know more, or you'd like to know what I mean by a tip, let me know, okay? And I am glad to get back to you with a DM or get back to the community. First tip is remembering that boundaries are always about you. Well, I'm saying this at you, but what you say to yourself, what I say to myself, is that boundaries are always about me. I am in charge of boundaries. I am in charge of my boundaries. And as soon as I move from my being in charge of my boundaries to the wagging finger about you need to this, you need to do that, you need to blah, 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 I lose power. Letting the other person set the boundaries, asking them to set the boundaries for you because you're afraid, as we discussed earlier, just doesn't work. Just doesn't work. It seems like it's going to be easier, but in the long run, it's harder. You don't want to set too many boundaries. I was thinking about those days when I used to wake up on my cycle or on my moon, and suddenly I felt beleaguered by the universal energy, and I had a long list of I want this, I want this, I want this. So my shorthand is, if your list of boundaries looks anything like, sounds anything like, is approaching the length of your grocery list, my beloved, pare it down. You only really need to have a few strong boundaries, and the rest of them, like it shows on my drawing and may show on your drawing, if you show up for yourself, you can negotiate them so they're more of a squiggle than a line. Another tip I've learned, and this is one, oh my Lord. Pop-Pops and I have we've been squabbling over this one, I would say for 40 years. And last year I came to terms with it. The toilet seat lid. I gotta tell you, or maybe I don't gotta tell you. Like, nothing like getting up at 3 a.m. to pee and you sit down and the lid isn't down and your bottom hits the cold water. Ah! Blech! Yuck! Oh! And so I would try every once in a while. I'd have like a mini tantrum over. Could you put the lid down? Could you put the lid down? I'm begging you, please put the lid down. Could I have putting the lid down as my birthday present, my Christmas present, my Mother's Day present? What can I do to get you to put the lid down? Well, so you see that that's not going to work because I'm trying to make it his boundary and his problem. And also he kept telling me, no, I believe it's your issue. If you go in there and the lid is up, you put it down. So here we are at a stalemate over the toilet seat lid. And then about a year ago, I thought, you know what? I'm done. It's fine. I have really listened to his point. I understand his point. It's not anything that I have the power to change except through my own actions. And that's one that's not worth it. One little note, in general, about boundaries. The things I'm talking about apply to setting healthy boundaries. You know if there's something unhealthy going on in your marriage. If you are being emotionally abused, physically abused, this doesn't apply to you anymore. What you need to do if you don't have the ability to set a boundary and you are suffering, turn off this video. Get some help. There are tons of resources out there for you. Tell me if you need to have links for hotlines for people who experience abuse. I will put them up. This video is about healthy boundary setting. And if you have worked on your boundaries and your person cannot respect them, and worse than that, responds with violence, that's it. That's not a healthy marriage and you need help to get out. So what have I learned after 41 years about boundary setting? What I've learned is that it's like diet and exercise. It is not, oh, I do it once and then it's done. Oh, I did my bicep curls, I never have to do them again. Oh, I ate some protein. I ate a low inflammation diet today, I never have to do it again. That's not true. Everything that we're talking about is an everyday thing. Just like feeding your body, taking care of your body. Marriage is its own biological being. It is its own critter. You have to take care of you and it every day. So I hope this was helpful for you. I'm here for you. Thank you so much for listening, and give yourself some love from me. Bye.